Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my instant reaction to Chris Eubank Jr. winning via unanimous decision versus Conor Benn. So if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So this was beyond what anybody realistically could have believed. You know, in my opinion, this might be a bold statement. I'm not really too sure. I obviously am not from the generation in which was from the dads originally fighting, but you know, personally, I went back and watched the entirety of both their dads' fights just this week, just to get a real kind of flavor and reminder of just how big the whole bloodline between these two fights, well, between this fight now is. And they were amazing fights, both of them. I mean, the second one, you know, perhaps wasn't as good as the first one, but the first one was a real back and forth fight, and you know, it ended in a dramatic fashion. And the second one was still, you know, like I say, a little bit more messy and things like that, but still was a great contest. This one, in my opinion, what we've just seen between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn stumps both of them. I think it was just a true war is the real kind of definition of it. It was two guys who you could see just they have their egos, and they just clashed with the egos, and they just neither of them was willing to take any sort of a backward step realistically, or even if they were up on the ropes, they're wanting to be aggressive. Neither of them kind of accepted themselves, let themselves to show any sort of mental weakness. I wasn't sure how strong mentally Conor Benn would be coming into this fight. You know, when he was in the ring, he was circling around, he was looking perhaps a little bit nervous, but you know, you're expected to be nervous. This is a huge event, and he's so young still as well. But you know, Chris Eubank, of course, he oozed his confidence. He did come on, like everybody else said, into the latter parts of the fight, but Conor Benn never looked out of it realistically. You know, there was times in the start of the fight where Conor caught Chris Eubank, and then we're thinking, you know, he might be able to get an early stoppage like I predicted. Yes, my prediction was wrong. I said Conor Benn would knock him out early. Obviously, he didn't. But Chris Eubank was able to hold in there. His chin still is there, and is there more so than ever. And, you know, he showed he could take a big shot. You know, he did look a lot bigger coming into this fight than that of Conor Benn. You could see that when they were fighting, but Conor Benn was able to land shots, but still have success. But Chris Eubank just kept coming forwards, and like I say, into the later rounds, I think he did use his experience, was the neater, the tidier in close, and just Conor Benn at times wasn't able to do enough in close. You know, that's where perhaps we all kind of thought he would thrive, but he hasn't been or had to experience being on the back foot in close, and I think that showcased a bit into the later rounds where Chris Eubank Jr. was, you know, perhaps doing a little bit of the better work in close, even though they were literally just going back and forth throughout a lot of the fights. And like I say, it was an immense fight, just a pure showing of just grit and determination. It lived up to beyond the hype, in my opinion, and like I say, we kind of do just have to see a rematch now. For the moment, you know, it's looking out like the Eubanks can't be beaten by the Benns, no matter what generation it is. But yeah, that was just something else. You know, that was history that has been written down in the history books. And for the first Ring magazine event, for the legacy that in which it has, it is just a huge fight with, just like I say, an amazing ending, and I suppose in whole entirety. I mean, I was so happy to see, like everybody else was, that Chris Eubank Sr. was there, and you know, he was in attendance when they opened up the door when Eubank Jr. was arriving, and we got to see Eubank Sr. there and, you know, posing with the door open and things like that, looking all happy and excited. You know, it brought it and it added to it. You know, maybe there was a little bit of mind games in the first place with Chris Eubank Jr. maybe perhaps knowing in fight week that Senior would show up, but when it did happen, it made it, you know, and that was what it needed to be. And with Nigel Benn there, both of them just overlooking on their own little table at this front of the at ringside, you know, it was what boxing needed. And for British boxing, that definitely could have hyped things up again, and you know, brought a new life into British boxing. I think that the rematch could sell at Wembley, which would be 90 odd thousand instead of like 60 odd thousand, which would be huge. And yeah, like I say, it's really lived up to every sort of hype in which it's had. You know, they're probably, like I say, in my opinion, has to be the rematch. I think there's no other fight that realistically makes sense. Obviously, with the weight and things, it makes it a bit tricky. but inevitably I do think it still has to be a rematch, and hopefully we will see it now. Obviously, I want to speak about the rest of the card, but I do just want to kind of end it on by saying that this fight was an excellent fight. And if you did manage to miss the pay-per-view, or didn't manage to get a site to stream on or something like that, go and watch even just the highlights, and you'll see how good of a fight this was. And yes, this wasn't as technical of a boxing display in which we've seen from excellent fights in recent times, such as Beterbiev versus Bivol in both of their fights, but this was just a pure aggressive, want to will and to give their all type of performance. And yeah, it was just amazing to see, and has got me so hyped up, as you can probably tell from the excitement I'm bringing into this video. But yeah, like I say, the whole card, it was full of unanimous decisions. There was no knockdowns or anything like that. Oh no, there was one knockdown in the entirety of the card, but it was still a good card. I mean, Anthony Yarde versus Lyndon after 3. Anthony Yarde won by unanimous decision. I got my prediction right. He becomes WBA Intercontinental Light Heavyweight Champion. He might already have been that, but I believe he's becoming it. That was an interesting fight. Lyndon Arthur was having success in the earlier parts of his jab, and Anthony Yarde was looking a little bit poor at times, even kind of when they were getting in close and fighting. Anthony Yarde, until the kind of last 2 rounds, wasn't really doing too much. I didn't think his power would be anything too crazy coming into this fight. I don't think he commits to his shots as well as what he should do, and he kind of patters his shots around a little bit too much, and is maybe trying to act too relaxed and they're too chilled. And just like I say, there's no need for it, and he probably could have caused more damage to Lyndon Arthur, because I think he did have another gear to go into. He just didn't really want to, but nonetheless, like I say, wins via unanimous decision. I think he was deservedly, winning via that, and I feel like that was a good result inevitably. And like I say, I don't really know who he goes on to fight next. Perhaps a Joshua Boatsi, but he's not getting himself in the line for a world title from that performance, in my opinion. And then also, Liam-Smith versus Aaron McKenna. I said that Aaron McKenna will be able to win via stoppage. He did win via unanimous decision, and he becomes WBA International Middleweight Champion. But obviously, he didn't win via stoppage. He won via unanimous decision, like I say, and that was an excellent performance by McKenna. He really showcased the youthfulness, the speed, the footwork, the just pitter-patter shots that did damage, but then also, growing into the fight, growing in confidence, waiting for Liam-Smith to wilt a bit more, seeing what Liam-Smith was offering, which really wasn't that much. And like I say, gaining confidence, he was able to fight on the outside, use his movement, spin him around, but also fight on the inside as well. And, he was using his forearm a little bit, kind of maneuvering around again, like I say, however he wanted to. And it was just an excellent performance from McKenna, and showcasing that Liam-Smith, like I kind of thought, couldn't deal with a world-class level opponent. And I feel like Aaron McKenna is a very underrated fighter, which now hopefully is going to get good recognition, and maybe out in Saudi with his excellency, because he definitely deserves some big fights now, and hopefully we'll go on to a world level type of fight next, because Liam-Smith, I don't necessarily know how much he's got left to give in his career. It wouldn't surprise me if he retires possibly after this fight, but still, Aaron McKenna's career realistically is just getting started, and yeah, that was a real coming of age performance from himself. Viddal Riley versus Chev Clarke was an excellent performance as well. Viddal Riley winning by unanimous decision and becoming British Cruiserweight Champion. Like I say, that was an excellent performance from Viddal Riley. He looked very smooth, very quickly got into his rhythm, was flowing with his punches, was making Chev Clarke look a bit silly. There was a time in which I thought Viddal was possibly tapering off a little bit, but then he came back strong again into the late rounds, and really did again, like I say, showcase his movement. His footwork was more superior. He was just effortlessly switching stance, and just moving like not many fighters in the cruiserweight division does, kind of moving similarly to maybe somebody like an Opetaya when he's at his best. And it's that relaxed, confident mindset that he does have. And yes, he wasn't able to really cause loads of damage, in which we were thinking he was going to get a stoppage at any point, but Chev Clarke was always going to be a very live, aggressive fighter who was always going to be a threat with his power. And so Viddal Riley did what he had to do and outboxed him and outclassed him. And then also, the first fight of the night was Brandon Glanton versus Chris Billiam-Smith. Of course, Chris Billiam-Smith won by unanimous decision. I got my prediction wrong. I thought Brandon Glanton would be able to win, but credit to Chris Billiam-Smith. He was able to withstand a bit of an early storm, but then push him back and inevitably have a lot of success when he was able to get his movement going and use his speed. And Brandon Glanton looked like he was just loading up way too much, really slowed down into the later rounds, couldn't withstand the pace, in which I thought he could, because when he fought David Light, he had quite a high pace throughout the fight. But when like I say, Chris Billiam-Smith was able to use his speed and get his movement going, which I feel like we should see more from Chris Billiam-Smith, because his movement isn't that bad. It's just he likes to sit on the ropes too long. When he did get his movement going, Chris Billiam-Smith was able to have a lot of success and be able to pretty much land whatever shot he wanted. If he came in combinations, did a little combination, and then circled round, he was able to have success. And so, it was a good performance from him as well. And realistically, he's probably going to set himself up for the winner of the Badu Jack versus Michaelian fight. And so, perhaps a world title might be next for him. But yeah, like I say, an excellent night for British boxing, and just really what British boxing needed. Probably the biggest night of the year for British boxing, unless perhaps we see the rematch. But realistically, I don't think much is going to top this first fight, because it was so good. We will have to wait and see. Of course, I'd like to be proved wrong. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.